I was reading a bit of a description of your paternal grandfather, Philip Wilson Street, and it sounds as though you took after him in many ways. It says here that he was not only a distinguished lawyer, but he was patron of many benevolent institutions. He was also the Lieutenant Governor of New South Wales, and his biographer stated that he had, quote, the culture, dignity and temperament suitable for his position. He had a wide knowledge of the law and the ability to quickly reach the heart of the matter, however complicated the case might be. It sounds like you took after him.
Oh, that's a nice compliment. Well, he was Chief Judge of Equity and I was Chief Judge of Equity, so I can claim that identity. But he was very, in the manner of his time, very proper. And I remember my older sister, my mother saying my older sister, who was married, who got a baby bump. It was all, after she was married, but she mustn't go around in tight clothes to see grandfather, because he would be shocked. Now that was the sort of the measure of the false morality of those days. But he was very, I won't say pompous, but he was a very formal man.
So I wonder then, what did he make of your mother, Jessie Street, who was a renowned suffragette and renowned for many things, and we'll come back to her in a moment. But when your father, Sir Kenneth Street, married Jessie, what did your grandfather, Philip, make of Jessie? Because Jessie would have been quite a rebel for her time.
Well, the parents, my father's parents and Jessie's parents both thought the marriage was likely to be a disaster, because Jessie already was, she'd been very active in university politics and Sydney University Women's College and so on, where my daughter Jessie, incidentally, is in residence at the moment. And she was an activist, and my father's parents were rather, sort of pillars of the establishment, and they thought that this marriage would never work between my father. And likewise, my mother's parents, but they were determined to get married, and they got engaged when they were in their late teens. Then the war intervened and so on, World War One.
How did your parents meet?
At the university, at Sydney University rowing. My father was in the St Paul's College rowing team, and Jessie, my grandmother, my mother, was active in the women's sports unions. Because in those days, ladies didn't play sport. And she founded the Sydney University Women's College hockey team, and they used to be referred to as the Newtown Tarts, because they'd run around in what were those days short skirts, because they showed their ankles, these days.
And they're bloomers, I imagine.
Yes.
And I suppose she saw your father displaying his manly charms in a little rowing.
Yeah, after a rowing. So it was after a regatta that they met first. Then they used to see each other, because there's always been a strong affinity between the students at St Paul's and the students at the Women's College, as I discovered from my daughter, who's also called Jessie, who's at Women's College.
I'm interested with your mother, Jessie Street. She, as I mentioned before, was a suffragette and, in fact, campaigned alongside the Pankhursts, I believe, in England. Was she ever chained to the Buckingham Palace fence like I know the Pankhursts were?
I think she was. I haven't got any specific evidence of it, but I believe she was. I know she was very close to Amelia Pankhurst. And if she wasn't, I know she'd have been very disappointed. She'd love to have been.
Your parents married, obviously, on the strength of having met at university. Would you nevertheless describe them as temperamental opposites?
Temperamental? I don't know. Temperamental is the word. I don't think either of them was temperamental in a pejorative sense, but they had differing views of society. My father was very much his father's son, part of the establishment, the legal establishment. Jessie was a rebel from the word go at school. She was at school in England at a school called Wickham Abbey, and she was always a stirrer, an initiator. So those who knew them thought this could never work, that Ken could never accommodate Jessie's sort of enthusiastic, and that she would be suffocated. But no, it was a very close marriage to start with, and then they went their own ways later. But
talented women in those days often, like your mother, found an outlet in causes of different kinds. They didn't have careers as such. But do you think, had your mother lived now, she would have definitely gone into a career and maybe not had children at all?
I think she would have had children, but she probably would have conformed to the modern approach of having children in the middle 30s. She used to say that life begins at 40. So I was born in 1926 when she was 37 years old, and I was the youngest of her children. I had 3 siblings. So she had her babies, and then she got going with her women's causes and political life after that. So she started her active public life in her late 30s, or when she was about 40.